The Ideal Made Real, Chapter 9. Count It All Joy. We meet something at almost every turn that we think ought to be different. If we have high ideals, we may not feel satisfied to permit those conditions to remain as they are. We may even complain or antagonize. On the other hand, if our ideals be low, we may feel wholly indifferent, but then we find that those things go from bad to worse. What we seek, however, is our present comfort on the one hand, and the betterment of everything about us on the other hand, and we wish to know how this may be brought in the midst of the confusion, the ignorance, and the ills that we find in the world. When we are indifferent to the wrong, it becomes worse. Therefore, even for our own good, we must do something with those adverse conditions that exist in the home, in society, or in the state. We must meet all those things and meet them properly, but the problem is how. To antagonize, criticize, or condemn never helps matters in the least. Besides, such states of mind are a detriment to one's own peace and health. The critical mind wears itself out while thinking about the wrong, but the wrong in the meantime goes on becoming worse. To feel disappointed because the universe does not move according to our fancy will not change the universe, but it will produce weakness in our own mind and body. The person who lives constantly in the world of despondency will soon lose all hold upon life. He consequently does nothing in the world but bring about the end of his own personal life. The usual way of dealing with the problems of life solves nothing. The ordinary way of meeting temptation gives the tempter greater power, while the person who tries to resist is usually entrapped in adversity and trouble. But St. James has told us what to do under all such circumstances. Count it all joy. That is the secret. Count it all joy, no matter what may come, agreeing with all adversity at once, antagonizing nothing, condemning no one, leaving criticism alone. Never be disappointed or discouraged, and have nothing whatever to do with worry. Whatever comes, count it all joy. He who meets adversity in the attitude of peace, harmony, and joy will turn enemies into friends and failures into greater good. When things do not come your way, never mind. Continue to count everything joy, and everything will change in such a manner as to give you joy. If you are seeking the best, all things will work together in such a way as to give you the best, and your heart's desires shall be realized. Possibly not today, but life is long. You can wait. That which is good is always good. It is always welcome whenever it comes. In the meantime, you are living in harmony and joy, and that in itself is surely a great good. The person who lives constantly in gloom drives even the sunshine out of his own mind. The clouds of gloom are so heavy that he fails to see the brightness that is all about him. The person, however, who counts everything joy will change everything to brightness and thus receive joy from everything. When you fail to receive what you sought, never for a moment be disappointed. Count it all joy. In fact, be supremely happy. You have a reason so to be. When you fail to get what you seek, it simply means that there is something still better in store for you. then why should you not count such an event great joy? This is always the case when your whole desire is to receive the best. And when you train yourself to count everything joy, your mind develops that desire that always desires the best. When you seek only the best only will come. And you must not feel disappointed when you are taken away from a hovel in order that you may enter a palace. When you meet enemies or adversaries, do not resist them or enter into warfare. Look for terms of agreement. Possibly they may seem to get the best of the bargain now, but you can afford to give them the terms they ask. The infinite is your supply. When one door closes, another opens, and if you depend upon the Supreme to open that other door, it will be a door opening into far greater and far better things than what you seemingly lost. Besides, by being kind to your adversary, you lifted yourself up. You are now a higher and a greater being. That means that you will now draw to yourself higher and better things. Consequently, it was not the enemy that got the best terms, it was you. Whatever you are called upon to do, do it and be happy. Count it all joy that you are given the opportunity to bring sunshine into dark places and develop your own latent power by doing what seemed difficult. You are equal to the occasion, if you think so. Therefore, you should consider it a great privilege to prove it. The world is waiting for great souls, souls that are ready to do what others failed to accomplish. You can become one of these great souls by proving to yourself that you are equal to every occasion, and that you will be equal to every occasion if you count everything joy. When you are in the midst of temptations, rejoice with your whole heart. You have found a great opportunity to turn wrong into right, and to turn wrong into right is always a mark of greatness. Millions of people have died unhonored and unsung who might have arisen to greatness and become leaders and saviors in the world if they would have demonstrated their superiority in the midst of temptation, tribulation, and wrong. Look upon all temptations and troubles as opportunities to make wrong right, and be glad that such opportunities have been presented to you. Count it all joy. Besides, the results will not only produce joy to yourself, but possibly to millions. He who changes wrong into right rises in the scale, and you can think of no greater good coming to you than this. He who remains below must be counted with the small and the ordinary. He who goes up higher shall gain everything that his heart may wish for. Therefore, whatever comes, or whatever you meet, or whatever you are called upon to do, proceed with peace and joy. Be glad that you have the opportunity to prove your own power and thus elevate yourself thereby. Be supremely happy to know that you may change many things for the better through this attitude, and thus bless the lives of multitudes. Train yourself to look at things according to this principle, and you will find that everything can produce joy. Everything can give cause for rejoicing, that is, providing everything is met in that attitude that counts everything joy. The same principle may be employed to great advantage in overcoming difficulties. When you are asked to do what seems to be very difficult, or when you are called upon to perform duties you do not like, never refuse. Count it all joy. To excuse yourself when such occasions appear is to lose most valuable opportunities. Every person desires to make the most of himself, but to accomplish this all, latent power must be awakened, and there is nothing that will bring forth our latent powers more thoroughly than the doing of what seems difficult. When you find yourself shrinking from certain tasks, you have discovered a weak faculty within yourself. Refuse to let that weak faculty remain in such a condition. Go and do what you feared to do. Let nothing hold you back. In this way, the weak faculty will be made strong, and your entire nature will pass through most valuable discipline and training. Nothing is really disagreeable unless we think so. That is, we may approach the disagreeable in such a way that it ceases to be disagreeable. And the secret is, count everything joy. You may enter darkness and gloom, but if you are living in a world of brightness and cheer, that darkness will not be darkness to you, nor will gloom enter your mind for a moment. You can remain in your own happy world, no matter what may happen, no matter what may take place in your immediate environment. When you resolve to do certain things and proceed with a conviction that you will enjoy the work thoroughly, you will find real pleasure in that work. Besides, you will do the work very well. Pleasure comes from within, and when the fountain of joy within is overflowing, it will give joy to everything that exists about us. To cause this fountain within to overflow at all times, count everything joy at all times. We should never look for weakness, but when we find it, we should proceed at once to change it into strength. Whenever we meet difficulties, or whenever we are called upon to do what we dislike, we have found a weakness. We may remove that weakness by doing with the will what the moment demands, and resolve to enjoy it. Never permit such occasions to pass by without being changed. The opportunity is too valuable. Whatever your present sphere of action may require you to do, that you are able to do, and the present demand upon your life and your talents must be supplied by you if you would bring out the best that is in you and make the great eternal now full and complete. Tasks that seem difficult and demands that seem unreasonable are, after all, neither difficult nor unreasonable. They are simply golden opportunities for you to become whatever you never were before. They are but paths to greater achievements, sweeter joys, and a larger life. Therefore, when you meet such occasions, count it all joy. When you fail to gain or realize in the present what you expected, do not feel disappointed. Make up your mind to be just as happy in those conditions that are as you expect to be in those conditions that you are looking for. The feeling of disappointment is not produced by events, it's produced by your own attitude toward events. You can meet all events in such a frame of mind that you never feel disappointed in the least, and that frame of mind is the result of counting everything joy. When you know that eternity is long and that countless joys are in store for you, you will not feel sad now because one insignificant event has been postponed, and when you have full control of your mind, you will have the power to produce just as much happiness in the absence of that event as in its presence, because events themselves cannot produce happiness. The same is true of things. We do not gain joy from things, but from the way we think about things. And we can think as we choose at any time, no matter what the circumstances may be. When the present demands happiness from something different than what you were looking for in the present, grasp the opportunity to prove that you are equal to this occasion. You thus develop latent ability. When you count everything joy, you know that you can always produce joy. You know that whatever happens is best because you have the power to cause it to become the best. The best always happens to those who seek only the best. Therefore, whatever comes should be received as the best, and we must give it the opportunity to prove that it is better than anything that could have happened. You are not dependent upon events for happiness. Happiness does not come from what we do or where we go. Happiness comes from what we are now, or what we create out of what is present now. Whether we be alone in a garret or in a gorgeous ballroom, the amount of happiness we are to receive in either place will depend entirely upon our own frame of mind. The frame of mind that you desire for the present moment you may have. If it does not come of itself, you can create it. You are the master. When things do not come the way we like, we can like them the way they are coming. This is how we agree quickly with our adversaries. We thus receive the enemy instead of fighting the enemy. And that which we receive in the true attitude of mind becomes our own. Count everything joy, and every adversity will give up its power to you. That which is evil becomes good when we meet it in such a way that we draw out of it the best that it may contain, and we always attract the best from everything when we meet everything in the conviction that all things work together for good. When nothing comes to give us happiness in the external, we can open the fount of everlasting joy in the great within. The heaven of the soul is ever ready to open its pearly gates, but we must look towards the soul if we would pass through those gates. We shall fail to see the fountain of joy within, however, so long as our whole attention is fixed upon those worldly pleasures that failed to come into our world. But if we count everything joy, we no longer feel disappointed about what did not happen. On the other hand, we enter into that joyous state of mind that will place us in direct contact with the source of limitless joy within the mind. When people speak unkindly of you, you will become offended if you thought they spoke unkindly. But if your eyes are too pure to behold iniquity, you will go on your way as if nothing had been said. You count everything joy, and thus you will receive joy from your own lofty position in the matter. When you are asked to do certain things, do not proceed with the feeling that you are compelled to. Go and do it because you want to. Say that you want to and count it all joy. We should never say, I have a duty to perform, but rather, here is an opportunity which I have the privilege to embrace. Train yourself to want to do whatever your present sphere of life may demand. He who loves and thoroughly enjoys what he is doing today will be asked to do greater things tomorrow. The large soul never asks if things are unpleasant or difficult. Such thoughts never enter his mind. Whatever he finds to do, he proceeds to do, with his mind full of will and his heart full of joy. If you dislike anybody, you have found a weakness in yourself. You have found a difficulty that must be overcome at once. Do not permit such obstacles to remain in your way. The soul that knows no weakness loves everything that God has created. The strong soul never considers those imperfections in life that man has created. Intelligence was not intended to be used in the study of nothingness, illusions, or mistakes. When we hate anything, we recognize the existence and the power of those things that have neither real existence nor real power. We therefore enter into a confused state of mind. What God has created, we cannot help but love. But if we see something else and dislike that something else, we are seeing something that God has not created. In other words, we are giving attention to illusions and mistakes, and the mind is not intended for that purpose. Remove the illusion by transforming that hate into love. This will change the point of view. You will thus see things from the upper side, the divine side, and when we look at things from the divine side, we find that everything is altogether lovely. Therefore, when you dislike anybody, overcome that weakness by giving that person all the love of your heart. Love that person and mean it, no matter what he has said or done. There is nothing in the world that lifts the soul so high above darkness and illusion as strong, pure, spiritual love. And it is not difficult to love a person when you know that he is God's creation, while his mistakes are simply man's creation. Mistakes must be forgiven. Our desire is to do the will of God, and to do the will of God is to love every creature in existence, and to love everything as God loves everything. The Ideal Made Real, Chapter 10. The True Use of Kindness and Sympathy. The ordinary use of sympathy is responsible for a very large portion of the ills and the troubles we find in the world. The reason being that nearly all suffering is mental before it is physical, and that mental suffering is almost invariably produced when we enter into sympathetic touch with the ills that we meet among relations, friends, or associates. The average person would suffer but little if he suffered only from the troubles that arise in his own system. It is the pain that is felt through sympathy for others that gives him most of the burden he finds it necessary to bear. It is considered a sign of kindness, goodness, and high regard, however, to sympathize with others in this manner, or rather to suffer with others, but this is not the true use of kindness. We do not help others by entering into the same weaknesses that is keeping them in a world of distress. We do not help the weak by becoming weak. We do not relieve sickness by becoming sick. We do not right the wrong by entering into the wrong or doing wrong. We do not free man from failures by permitting ourselves to become failures. We do not emancipate those who are in bondage to sin by going and committing the same sin. This is very simple, but ordinary sympathy is based upon the idea that we sympathize with the person only when we suffer with that person. We expect to relieve pain by proceeding to produce the same pain in our own systems, but we cannot remove darkness by entering into the dark. We can remove wrong only by removing the cause of that wrong. And to remove the cause of the wrong, we must produce the cause of right. Darkness disappears when we produce light. Likewise, sickness and trouble will vanish when we produce health and harmony. But we cannot produce health and harmony by entering into disease and trouble. This, however, is what ordinary sympathy does. It has therefore failed to relieve the world. The ordinary use of sympathy multiplies suffering by making suffering contagious. It causes the suffering of the one to give pain to the many, and then, in turn, causes the pain of the many to give additional pain to each individual person whose sympathy is aroused in the same connection. We must remove everything that tends to make ills contagious, whether it be physical or mental, and it is very evident that ordinary sympathy does spread pains and ills to a very great degree. Therefore, one of the first essentials in producing emancipation or in making real the ideal is to find the true use of sympathy. Sympathy itself must not be removed because it is one of the highest virtues of the soul. The average person, however, misapplies this virtue continuously, and in consequence brings pains and ills both to himself and others that could easily have been prevented. There is a better use for sympathy, and through this better use we cause all the good things in life to become contagious. Instead of entering into sympathetic touch with the weaknesses that may temporarily exist in the personality of man, we enter into sympathetic touch with the strength that permanently exists in the soul of man. Instead of morbidly dwelling upon the ills and the wrongs which we find, we proceed to gain the highest possible realization of the good, the right, the superior, and the beautiful that we know has existence back of and above the superficial life of human nature. According to a metaphysical law, when we enter into mental contact with the good in man, we awaken the power of that which is good in man, and the most perfect mental contact is produced by sympathy. To sympathize with the soul is to increase the active power of the soul, because we always arouse into greater action that with which we sympathize, and when the active power of the soul is increased, the weakness of the personality will become strength. To sympathize with the power of health and harmony in man will increase the power of health and harmony throughout his entire system, and the elimination of sickness and trouble must inevitably follow. To sympathize with the pain a person may feel is to do nothing to relieve that person. You take the pain to yourself, but you do not take the pain away from the person with whom you sympathize. You thus double the suffering instead of removing it entirely as you should. On the other hand, when we refuse to recognize the suffering itself and proceed to awaken in that person something that can remove the suffering, we protect ourselves from pain while we actually do something to relieve that person from pain. We do not suffer with the person that suffers, but we do something to remove suffering absolutely from everybody concerned. Instead of entering into the pain, we take that person out of pain. That is sympathy that is sympathy. That is kindness that really results in a kind act. It does not weep, but does better. It removes both the cause and the effect of the weeping. It awakens that superior power in man that positively does produce emancipation. It does not cause suffering to be transmitted to a score of other persons who have done nothing to merit that suffering, but it stops the pain where it is and puts it out of existence absolutely. Every form of suffering comes from the violation of some law in life. It is therefore wrong, but it cannot be righted by making a special effort to spread the results of that wrong among as many others as is possible. This, however, ordinary sympathy does. It makes a special effort to make everybody feel bad because someone is not feeling as he should, but the pains of the many cannot give ease and comfort to the one, nor can many minds in bondage set one mind free. When anyone is feeling bad, it will not help him to have a group of morbid minds suffer with him. When anyone is sorry, it will not remove the cause of his grief to have others decide to be sorry also. Do something so that person will not feel bad any more. Take him out of his trouble. That is real sympathy. And while you are helping him out, make him feel that your heart is as tender as tenderness itself. Do something so that the grief may be removed through the realization of that greater truth that knows that all is well. That is kindness worthy of the name. Those, however, who are in the habit of sympathizing in the ordinary way may think the new way cold and devoid of feeling or love, but the fact is that it is the ordinary form of sympathy that is devoid of love. When you love a person who is in pain, you will not stand around and weep, pretending that you are also feeling bad. You will put on the countenance of light and cheerfulness and actually do something tangible to remove his pain. That's love. And if you have any real sympathy, you will minister to him with so much depth of feeling and tender kindness that you will touch the very innermost life of his soul. All love, all tenderness, all kindness, and all real feeling come from the soul. Therefore, he whose sympathy is of the soul will receive his love and kindness directly from the true source. In consequence, he will have more love and more kindness by far than the one whose sympathy is a form of morbid feeling. The real purpose of true sympathy is twofold. First, to arouse in a greater measure that finer something in life that is not only tender and sweet and beautiful, but it is also immensely strong with the strength of the infinite. And second, to awaken everything in man that has quality, superiority, and worth. That is, to make man feel the supreme power of his own inherent divinity. There is something in man that is greater than all weakness, all ills, all wrongs, and when this something is awakened, developed, and expressed, all weakness, all ills, and all wrongs must disappear. To sympathize with this greater something in everybody with whom one may come in contact will arouse this greater something, not only in others, but also in him who lives in this form of sympathy. In other words, to sympathize with the superior in man is to banish the wrong and the inferior, by causing the expression of that divine something within that has the power to make all things well. Such a sympathy will tend to build a stronger life, a better life, a superior life, a more beautiful life, and to give such a sympathy to everybody is kindness indeed. There may seem to be kindness in weeping with those who weep, but it is a far greater kindness to give those people the power to banish their sorrows completely. And he who does this is not cold. He is the very essence of the highest and the most beautiful love. There is no joy in having sorrow. There is no pleasure in having pain. Therefore, what greater good can man do for man than to help him gain complete emancipation from all those things? And this is the purpose of this higher use of sympathy. True sympathy is neither cold nor purely intellectual. It is real soul feeling, while ordinary sympathy is simply a morbid mental feeling. True sympathy is the very fire of real spiritual love, because it springs from the very soul of love and is in constant touch with the unbounded power of that love. That such a sympathy should have extraordinary emancipating power is therefore most evident. The ordinary use of sympathy may appear to be kind. It may mean well, but it is usually a misdirected kindness, and is nearly always weak. The higher use of sympathy, that is, the expression of divine sympathy, is not only kindness itself, but it has the spiritual understanding and the spiritual power to do what kindness wants to do. Ordinary kindness is usually crippled. It lacks both the power to do and the understanding to know what to do. The true sympathy, however, not only has the power to feel kindly, but has the power to act kindly. It not only gives love and makes everybody feel that they are in the presence of real love, but it also gives that something that can cause the purpose of love to come true. Real love invariably aims to produce comfort, peace, and emancipation. That is its purpose, and real sympathy can fulfill that purpose. Therefore, this higher sympathy is the sympathy that is sympathy. The same principle should be employed in the use of every form of emotion, because every emotion is a movement of the mind conveying mental elements and powers with certain definite objects in view. Therefore, the way the emotion acts will determine to a very great extent whether these mental powers will build for better things or produce undesirable conditions. Those movements of the mind or emotions that express themselves in love, heartfelt joy, and spiritual feeling have a beneficial effect, while that mental feeling that is usually termed emotionalism is never wholesome. True spiritual feeling is calm but extremely beautiful, and awakens orderly and harmoniously all the finer elements of human life. It is true spiritual feeling, or what may be termed emotions sublime, that gives action and expression to personal quality, mental worth, and individual superiority. In other words, it is these actions of mind and soul that elevate thought, action, feeling, consciousness, and desire above the planes of the ordinary. Such emotions should therefore be cultivated to the very highest and finest degree. What is spoken of as heartfelt joy is that wholesome joy that comes directly from the heart and that has depth, reality, and joyous feeling. But that joy that runs into uncontrolled ecstasy is never wholesome. Every feeling of joy that causes the mind to be carried away into excited or overwrought ecstasy is not joy, but mental intoxication. Such joy does not produce genuine happiness, and the reaction always disturbs the equilibrium of the mind. Depth of thought, clear thinking, intellectual brilliancy, good judgment, and mental poise, all of these will diminish in the mind that indulges in uncontrolled ecstasy, emotionalism, or pleasure that produces excitability and overwrought emotional feeling. The feeling of love, when it is love, is always wholesome and elevating, but passionate desire is weakening unless it is permeated through and through with genuine love. A deep, strong feeling of love will turn all desires, whether mental or physical, into constructive channels, but we must be certain that it is real love and not an artificial feeling temporarily produced by the misuse of the imagination. Here, every mental movement that is intense, forced, overwrought, or worked up to an abnormal pitch of excited enthusiasm leads to emotionalism, and emotionalism burns up energy. Nearly all kinds of nervous diseases can be traced directly or indirectly to emotionalism in one or more of its many forms, and as physical and mental weakness always follows the burning up of energy, a number of physical and mental ills can be traced to this source. When emotionalism, fear, anger, and worry are eliminated, all kinds of insanity and all kinds of nervous diseases will be things of the past, while the power, the capacity, and the brilliancy of the average mind will increase to an extraordinary degree. Strong emotional feelings and intense enthusiasm will sometimes arouse a great deal of dormant mental power. In consequence, people sometimes do exceptional things while under the emotional spell, but the entire process, as well as the final results, are very similar to that produced by alcoholic stimulants and other drugs. The system seems to be charged with a great deal of extra power for a while, but when the reaction comes, the entire system becomes much weaker than it ever was before. The mind that permits itself to be aroused by intense emotional feeling will gradually lose its power of clear thought. The understanding will become so weakened that the principles of real truth cannot be fully comprehended, while the judgment will follow more and more the illusions of an overwrought imagination. The fact that religious feeling among millions is so closely associated with this overwrought state of emotionalism proves the importance of a better understanding of the use of these finer mental elements. Emotionalism compels the mind to follow mere feeling, and mere feeling, when not properly blended with clear understanding, will be misdirected at every turn. Emotionalism also stupefies the finer perceptions by intoxicating the mind and by burning up the finer mental energies. And since these finer perceptions are required to discern real truth, we understand readily why highly emotional people cannot comprehend the principles of pure spiritual metaphysics. Having been trained towards materialistic literalism instead of away from it, they are not to blame, however, for their present state, and deserve no criticism. Nevertheless, those who wish to find real religion and real spirituality must learn to understand the psychology of emotion, and must learn the true use of all the finer feelings of the mind. There is something in man that is called religious feeling. It is present to a greater or lesser degree in everybody, and cannot be removed, because it is a part of life itself. When in action, and it is never inactive very long, it expresses itself in some power of emotion. When this emotion, or delicate mental movement, is permitted to act without any definite purpose, it becomes emotionalism, that is, mental energy running rampant, and becoming more and more intense until it destroys itself as well as all the energy it originally contained. On the other hand, when this feeling is directed towards the highest and the most perfect conceptions of truth, life, and being that the mind can possibly picture, all that is lofty, ideal, and beautiful will be developed in the mind and the soul of that individual. This is natural, because there is nothing that has greater developing power than deep spiritual feeling, a fact that those who desire to develop remarkable ability, extraordinary talent, and rare genius will do well to remember. There is no mental faculty that is more readily affected by the emotions than the imagination. And since the imagination is such a very important faculty, no mental or physical action that in any way interferes with the constructive work of the imagination should be permitted. Emotionalism, however, invariably excites the imagination, and an excited imagination will imagine all sorts of things that are not true. The mind will thus be filled with illusions, and in consequence false beliefs, wrong thoughts, perverted states, and misdirected mental energy will follow. The result will be sickness, trouble, mistakes, and failures in one or more of their many forms. It is now a well-demonstrated truth that every thought has a definite power of its own, and that that power will produce its natural effect in some part of the human system. If the thought is not good, the effect will naturally be undesirable, and conditions will be produced in mind or body that we do not want. But whatever we imagine, that we think. Therefore, when we excite the imagination, we imagine all manner of things that are untrue, unreal, or abnormal. We produce false or perverted thought action in the mind. We think the wrong, and wrong thoughts invariably produce wrong conditions in mind, body, or both. What we imagine, we reproduce in ourselves to some degree, frequently to a marked degree, but an excited imagination simply cannot imagine what is good and wholesome. In every form of development, whether in the body, the mind, or the soul, the imagining faculty is employed extensively. All growth is promoted by combining and recombining the elements of life in higher and higher forms. And since it is one of the functions of the imagination to produce these higher, more complex, and more perfect combinations, development cannot take place unless the imagination works orderly, constructively, and progressively. An excited imagination will produce false mental combinations, or may waste energy by attempting to combine mental elements that will not combine. An orderly imagination may be likened to a skilled workman who builds a beautiful mansion out of his bricks, while an excited imagination might be likened to someone who can do nothing more than pile those bricks into a heap. The fact that emotionalism always excites the imagination proves, therefore, how impossible it is for minds with uncontrolled emotions to develop the greatness that is latent within them. Another fact of great importance in this connection is that emotionalism will intensify every mental tendency that may be active in mind at the time. If there is a tendency towards abnormal desires, emotionalism will intensify those desires so that it will be very difficult to resist temptation should it appear. On the other hand, pure spiritual feeling would transmute those desires and produce instead an ascending tendency, thus leading all the forces of mind towards higher ground. To overcome emotionalism, intense mental feeling, anger, excitability, and all overwrought or abnormal mental states, turn attention upon the spiritual heights of the soul whenever such mental feelings are felt. By training all mental feelings and emotions to move toward the deeper and the higher spiritual state of being, these same feelings will become stronger, deeper, finer, and more beautiful than they ever were before. We thus establish the foundation upon which we can build an ideal character, and through such a character, all the qualities of mind and soul can be used beneficially in the midst of every experience, whatever the nature of that experience may be. To cause all the emotions to follow ascending tendencies will increase remarkably the power, the fineness, the life, and the rapture of every phase of feeling, not only in the soul, but in the mind and the body as well. Every trace of coldness, indifference, or lack of feeling will entirely disappear, and we shall develop instead that higher form of kindness, sympathy, and spiritual emotion that is created in the likeness of divine emotion. Whoever employs this method will not permit his feelings to run wild at any time, but will cause the life and the power of every feeling to accumulate in his system. He will hold them all in poise and use their energies intelligently in the building up of his whole life and in adding to the joy, the rapture, and the delight of the living of a full, strong, ever-ascending state of existence. That person who controls his feelings and turns all the energies of those feelings upon the spiritual heights of the soul will actually become a living flame of love, sympathy, and sublime emotion. Such a person will enjoy everything intensely, but his joy will be in such a high state of harmony that he will waste nothing in his life. Instead, all the elements and powers of his life will continue to accumulate, thus giving added strength, worth, and superiority to everything that he may physically, mentally, or spiritually possess.